Let's talk a little bit about chameleons. It's a topic that's not discussed much here on the channel because it's not really the focus. But this is something I've been noticing. It's happening on YouTube. Not on my channel because my channel is pretty closed off. It has had some clear rules for a long time now. But on other channels. Let's explain, right? What is a chameleon? A chameleon is that woman who might have a feminist lifestyle, a feminist background, but she keeps up a facade. She keeps up a facade to try to pose as a conservative or a libertarian or a traditionalist. It's basically that thing. She identifies some niche that's attractive to men that will give her access to better men and more benefits. And then she starts to act. This is a normal, very simple dynamic, because usually when you're getting involved with a woman, especially at the beginning of the relationship, and she's really attracted to you, she's really admiring you, she starts trying to emulate you. She picks up on the things you like and starts to act accordingly. So women naturally are chameleons. But anyway, something that has already happened in the United States, not just regarding MGTOW or the manosphere, but also in the context of the alt-right, the new right, the alternative right, which is where it came from. The term trad thought, or translated conserva babe, is as follows. After some time, a few years after MGTOW emerged, or a few years after the alt-right appeared, women started to show up, especially in the alt-right, who supported the alt-right, supported this new right. They would pose as conservatives, as traditionalists, and then people started digging into their backgrounds and saw that it wasn't quite like that. Rushvi talked about this a lot, that and that Pew guy, also well known. Anyway, people would either dig into their backgrounds or simply analyze their lifestyles. They would say things like, oh, you're such and such age, why aren't you married? Why aren't you having children? Why are you living a career-focused lifestyle? If you talk so much about your nation, about the birth rate, why aren't you contributing? Why are you just online, right? Making little videos, repeating things that men have been saying for a long time, and asking men to donate to your Patreon so you can travel the world. That was the harsh criticism women received there. In MGTOW, some well-known channels started to appear. I think one I remember is Nola Girl, something like that. Women saying, I support MGTOW. And solutions? What are you going to do about it? No, I support MGTOW. Making some generic little videos again, like I said, taking something other men have already said and repeating it. There are other well-known women on the right as well, like Romy Millennium. I think Lauren Southern is the most famous. There was another one from that group speaking in favor of MGTOW and Red Pill called Ukrainian Girl, something like that. But anyway, you can already understand what the chameleon dynamic is about. Whether in a micro-environment like a relationship or on a macro level like this virtual identity, an identity on the internet. But anyway, I'm already seeing on some other channels some women saying, oh, I support MGTOW and so on, blah, blah, blah. And I see the same thing happening there that I saw happening in the men's rights movement a long time ago. So, okay, let's take it step by step. First, we need to understand what I've already mentioned, that women try to emulate something. They try to create an image, often an artificial one, in order to a particular man, to attract men, to gain access to more benefits, to have a better social image, right? And then in this regard, what has happened especially in the last 10 years? Women in general realize that the label of feminist, if she's an outspoken card-carrying feminist, kind of ruins her access to higher level men, to true alphas, a man who has self-respect. He's not going to get involved with a card-carrying feminist, right? But here's the thing, they dropped that label. They could simply drop the feminist label, regardless of whether they're actually living a feminist lifestyle or not. I'm talking about the label, the image she's trying to project to others, which often isn't even a real image. She could simply become someone neutral, right? Oh, I don't talk about politics, I don't talk about economics. Who cares? But what am I talking about now? I'm talking about, that would be like a chameleon, but a mild chameleon. But we're talking about those who are picking up labels. So we can look at the ones on the right, the libertarians, or alt-right, or in the men's rights movement, or even some others, like wanting to become, I don't know, a little MGTOW fan. Is it rare? Yeah, very rare. My God, but it does happen. You know, I've seen this happen abroad, I've seen it happen here too. But anyway, why do they do this? They do this because they see a trend and they probably spot some high-value men in these groups, right? High-value guys, men with resources, with status. On the right wing, among conservatives, my God, there are so many frustrated betas with money looking to find a little unicorn. These guys are easy prey for these women. Chameleons. But anyway, it's been a while, must be a few months now. Since the end of last year on my channel, there have been two very clear rules. The first is this. If a woman comes to the channel and starts with the not all speech, you know, that argument of not all women are like that. We're discussing generalizations, and every generalization has some truth to it. It easily applies to more than half the population. In the case of the generalizations about women that we address on our channels, usually they hold true. They easily apply to 80% of the female population, and just as easily to 80% of the male population. So these women, whether they just happen to stumble upon the channel by chance, or they're simply the ones trying to find some niche where there are a lot of men gathered so they can blend in like a chameleon, they show up and drop that line, not all women are like that. On my channel, if any woman shows up doing that, she gets banned right away. And then there's another thing, which is the reversal. Reversal goes like this. They come in, act like allies, agree with some of the things you say, but then they go, oh, but there are a lot of men who do the same thing too, right? Oh, but men do that too, you know. That's when they start bringing up misogyny or hate speech. They get banned right away. Why? Because that's the moment when she gets more emotionally worked up. She sees that there aren't a bunch of white knights showing up to defend and support her. When she says some nonsense and realizes she's not controlling the narrative, which is something they do a lot in right-wing conservative spaces, and I've also seen it a few years ago in men's rights movements too. When they see they're not controlling the narrative, that's when the mask falls and all that feminist behavior and rhetoric comes out. Because this thing of saying, oh, not every woman is like that, but there are a lot of men who do this or that, that's feminist rhetoric, man. It's simply feminist rhetoric. Because if you analyze it, sure, there are men who are jerks, there are women who are jerks. Okay, but who in today's society gets a free pass to be a jerk? Who can be a jerk and not get punished legally? Sometimes they're even rewarded or praised for it. It's women, you see? So you can really see it's just a bunch of chameleons trying to use words like they're magic tricks. They don't need to have any effect on reality or consistency or real well-founded information. They just want to say something to try to get validation, to try to attract a man and say, oh, I'm one of you too. No, don't come at me with that. In fact, sometimes it's just about controlling the narrative or feeling offended, losing emotional control. But another thing you can clearly see happening is this. Every time a discussion leans towards some feminist right, let's be real, some feminist privilege, they immediately get worked up. Right away they get worked up. No, let's try to discuss society's problems. Let's try to find solutions. Then there comes a point in the discussion where someone says, okay, we need to restrict voting, or we need to end unilateral custody, or we need to end alimony, or we need to start punishing paternity fraud, punishing adultery. Every time it gets to something like that, it's a given. Right away the mask falls, right? And there's no point. You shouldn't even pay attention, right? On my channel from the very beginning, I've told the guys, man, just ignore it. If a woman shows up here, ignore her. Most of the time, they're just looking for attention. They're not being honest. Like I've said before, truly independent women are about 20% of them. And independent and honest, that drops to about 5%. Those who are independent enough to compete with men, physically, intellectually, and so on. So if you look at it in general terms and consider the statistics, you don't even see a reason to bother, right? And the chances of them being a chameleon are extremely high. And like I've always said, they'll either go with the Nawalt thing saying, oh, not all women are like that, or they'll try to deflect by saying, no, but there are a lot of men who are jerks and all that, which is just equalist talk, it's nonsense. Or they'll freak out when any of their feminist rights or privileges are questioned. So there's really no reason to waste your time. And there's another thing too. A lot of times they're shocked because if you look at a right-wing conservative environment, it's full of men who are desperate to find a time machine, to try to go back to a traditional arrangement, to be the provider dad. So they're basically out there hunting for women. Like I said, they're easy prey for these chameleons. If you look at an environment like that, a more egalitarian channel or a men's rights movement, there are a lot of men there still trying to find a woman who's good enough. And maybe he won't want to be the sole provider. He'll want to split the bills and everything else. So they're not exactly easy prey for these women, but even so, they're still vulnerable. They're kind of halfway there, so to speak. And that's why usually what do women do? They become right-wing attention seekers. They become conservative attention seekers because the conservative man is willing to be a full provider, right? If she goes to a more egalitarian environment, a men's rights space, she'll find a guy who's willing at most to be a semi-provider or to split the expenses. And then what happens is they get shocked when they come across a more MGTOW, more red pill channel, which tends to completely abandon the game and has a celibate lifestyle. That's when they really get shocked, because imagine she enters a right-wing environment trying to offer herself, trying to play the chameleon. She enters an egalitarian environment trying to offer herself, trying to play the chameleon, right? What does she expect to gain when she comes to a channel of men who are giving up on the game, who don't want to get married, don't want to have kids, and many of them are already leaning toward a celibate lifestyle if they're not already living one? Basically, it's like that scene from the Lord of the Rings meme when Gandalf arrives at the house of that king who's under the control of Saruman or Sauron, and he says, "You have no power here." That's basically it, and there are a lot of women who come to these channels and so on, and they freak out because they show up thinking they're going to get the same support they get everywhere else in the world. They show up thinking they're going to get the same level of validation they get everywhere else in the world. And then when they encounter men who, for the most part, don't want anything to do with them, that's when they freak out. That's the moment when the ground falls out from under the woman, and she loses all that sense of security she feels everywhere else in the world. Because there can't be an environment where she's not put on a pedestal. And often what they do when they see an environment where they're not put on a pedestal, especially an environment where there are a lot of men gathered and exchanging information, they want to censor that environment. They want to destroy that environment. So look, be very careful with the chameleons, because women are desperate. They're realizing that feminism has messed them up, feminism. It's a label that drives men away, and now they're trying to come up with some other label to try to attract men. But they're not willing to make any changes to the laws, and they're not willing to give up any privilege. So in that case, the game isn't worth it.